Hi, my name is Acier and this happened to me last year. After working hard for a whole year, I finally saved enough to buy my first new car and I couldn't be more excited. But since there wasn't much space in my driveway, I made the decision to sell my old Hyundai. I started by asking friends and family if they needed a car, but since nobody seemed interested, I finally decided to put it up for sale on Facebook Marketplace. It was a 2003 Sonata with 120,000 miles, and after doing some research, I decided to offer it for $4,000, or at least that's what I hoped to get. However, a couple of weeks passed, and no one was really interested. So I was starting to lose hope until I finally received a message. Someone called Freddie wanted to buy it, and after a couple of exchanges and haggling on his part, I managed to agree on a price. $3,400. Perfect, I thought. What's more, Freddie told me he could pay in cash, which was a great relief. He mentioned that we could meet in a garage that he supposedly had, since he didn't have a car now, and he sent me the location. I was a bit worried about the distance, so I asked my friend Jeremy if he could accompany me, and he said it was no problem, so I went to his house so he could follow me to the garage. The road was mostly on the main road at first, but then we had to take some side streets, and after a good 20-minute drive, the GPS told us we had arrived. I could see the garage from the car, but I noticed that Jeremy wasn't next to me. He must have got lost in one of the lights, I thought. So I decided to wait for him in the car. A few minutes passed, and when I saw that they still hadn't arrived, I decided to call Freddie, but when I saw that he didn't answer, I started to worry. However, while I was waiting in the car, I saw two men come out of one side of the garage, and I tried to see if either of them looked like Freddie's profile photo, but no. So I thought they were customers of the garage or something like that. What I didn't expect was for them to come over to me. I smiled and nodded, thinking they just wanted to know who I was. But before I could say a word, the guy closest to me took a gun out of his belt and pointed it right at my face. I froze. In an instant, my hands left the steering wheel and instinctively rose, as a sign that I didn't want any trouble. "Please don't shoot," I said, not knowing what they wanted from me. His friend approached my window and, as if nothing had happened, opened it, and I hadn't had time to secure the car before they gave me the surprise. Out of nowhere, a third man came and all three jumped in, and before I could understand what was happening, I was knocked to the ground. I tried to stay calm, knowing that any sudden movement could make things worse, but then, in the blink of an eye, they started my car and drove away. The whole scene had played out in less than a minute, and I was still in a state of shock. On the one hand, I was grateful to be alive, but on the other, I couldn't process what had happened to me. I got up slowly, looking around for Jeremy, but he was nowhere to be seen. So I decided to walk to the garage to see if there was any clue as to what had just happened. As I looked out of the window, I realized that the garage was completely empty and abandoned. I couldn't believe it. How come I hadn't realized it? I had been caught out from the start, and now it all made sense. Freddie, or rather the guy who called himself Freddie, had used a fake profile. I quickly took out my phone and opened Facebook to find his profile, but as soon as I got there, I realized that his account had been deleted. However, he had been online just before the meeting. I was both very upset and angry with myself. I felt like a complete idiot for not having taken any precautions. The police had to know what had happened, so I called immediately, explaining the situation and reporting the theft. As I waited for Jeremy to arrive, a feeling of despair came over me. I was just beginning to come to terms with what had happened. Finally, Jeremy turned up, and together we left the place as quickly as possible. On the way, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to my car. Who were those men? Would they find them? I had a mixture of anger, fear, and frustration that made a knot in my stomach. That experience had left a deep mark on me, but the worst thing was the uncertainty of not knowing what would happen to my car or to those guys. We walked home, where I felt the relief of being safe, although the adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, and I promised myself that I would never use Facebook to sell anything again. The trust I had placed in that platform had cost me dearly, so that was the last time I let an online ad interfere with my life. All that's left is to learn from this experience and be a little more attentive to the signs. Thank goodness I had Jeremy by my side, supporting me. However, I would never forget that strange meeting in the garage and the feeling of being the victim of a deception that almost cost me everything. The question took me completely by surprise, making me feel terrified of the situation. It was strange, no doubt, but I decided to play along. "Whatever it takes," I said, trying to sound confident. The atmosphere became tense when Martinez looked at me very seriously. "We can help you with that, but you have to do what we say. Are you really willing to do anything?" My blood ran cold. Something in his tone told me that I was about to cross a dangerous line. "Is he serious?" I wondered. "What does that mean?" I replied, trying to remain firm, but my nerves began to overflow. "First, you must prove that you are capable of sacrificing something you love," he said. "What exactly do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Martinez paused before saying, "If you really want to be a successful actress, you must be able to make great sacrifices. We can take you to stardom. You need to sacrifice someone close to you, someone who is important to you. You must kill her." Everything went dark in that instant. The atmosphere in the room changed drastically. It was no longer an audition. It was a nightmare. A few months ago, I'd been at a party during Fashion Week and I heard a drunk model talking about some guys in black suits who wanted her to kill someone. According to her, they were part of the Illuminati. At the time, I laughed at the situation, thinking it was just the result of her drunkenness and she was making up conspiracy theories. But now I wasn't so sure. Were they really the ones sitting in front of me? Just when I thought it was all a macabre joke, I realized it wasn't. "This isn't an audition, is it?" I muttered, fear in every word. I got up from the chair, trying to keep my legs steady because I swear to you they were starting to shake. My survival instinct was screaming at me that I should get out of there as soon as possible, so, as gracefully as I could, I said, "Thank you for the opportunity, gentlemen, but I don't think I'm what you're looking for." Then I turned and left, feeling an icy chill running up my spine. As I left, I looked over my shoulder and saw Martinez and his associates with the same empty, chilling expression. As you walked to the exit, my mind kept imagining that at any moment thugs would come out from anywhere and catch me, or that one of those guys would shoot me in the back, or that they would kidnap me anyway. But nothing happened. I just walked out the door, back onto the street and straight back to my apartment. However, I have lived in fear since that day. I see men in black suits who seem to follow me everywhere, whether near my apartment, at fashion shows, or even when I go to the supermarket. It's a feeling of being watched 24 hours a day. I can't help wondering what they really want from me or if they're trying to hurt me. So, if you are someone who dreams of being a model or an actress, my advice is clear. Ignore all those anonymous messages on social networks. Playing with fire can be very expensive, and sometimes the price you have to pay is too high. Stay away from those dangers that are often disguised as brilliant opportunities, because all that glitters is not gold. It was a time when the conflict with the Islamic State was exploding in Iraq and Syria. I remember a friend of mine, Albert, passed on the details of an Instagram account run by a group called Peshmerga, or something like that. These guys were like a militia made up of Kurdish fighters who were being persecuted by ISIS jihadists, so they were in a real war. What caught my attention was that they posted a lot of combat videos and photos posing with weapons and equipment they had captured from ISIS. Some of the things they shared were quite macabre, extreme in fact, but for some reason I decided to follow the account. One day, while checking my feed, I saw a photo that left me frozen. It was what appeared to be an ISIS prisoner, covered in blood and with an expression of despair on his face that made my heart shrink. The caption was in Kurdish, so it was difficult for me to understand, but thanks to Google Translate, which somehow had a Kurdish option, I managed to decipher some of the words, although the translation was a bit wonky and some words didn't make sense, but that's how I got the gist. What I read there left me feeling uneasy. I don't remember the exact words, but it was kind of creepy. It said something like "vote to execute," and then gave a time period for voting. In other words, the Peshmerga were asking their Instagram followers to decide whether this prisoner should live or die, and surprisingly, almost all the comments were a litany of phrases like "yes," "kill him," "do it." Only a handful of people tried to argue against it, saying that they should not be turned into what they themselves hated, that they were not barbarians. I was stunned to see that, as I shared the post with Albert, who had shown me the account in the first place. We spent hours debating whether the prisoner really deserved such a sentence, and I couldn't help thinking how horrible what his ISIS friends were doing was. The atrocities they were committing, selling women and girls into slavery and executing innocents en masse. But in the end, did it really matter what we thought? While we were at it, Albert sent me another post, this time reacting with an emoji that conveyed horror and shock. Something like a yellow emoji with bulging eyes. It was a photo of the same prisoner that had been posted hours earlier, but this time he was lying on the ground, with that empty look on his face and a pool of blood accumulating under his body. He had been murdered, and it had all been decided on Instagram. The shiver that ran through me was indescribable. I can't deny that the guy might have deserved his fate, but knowing that it had been decided by a voting system, something so cold and calculated, left me completely frozen. In that moment I realized that, despite claiming to fight monsters, they too could become something terrible. It was easy to understand the anger the Kurds might feel at being persecuted, but that didn't justify them becoming executioners too. However, who can judge in the midst of so much madness? If you were in their place with your people being massacred and sold like merchandise, you would probably want revenge at any cost. The posts were soon deleted and the account blocked, which definitely made sense. Instagram couldn't allow that kind of content, but like a game of cat and mouse, every time they deleted an account, another one would immediately appear with similar images and outrageous comments. And it wasn't an isolated incident. I saw those kinds of posts over and over again on social media. After all that, I honestly found it hard to look at the world in the same way. It was difficult to think that despite being thousands of miles away, humanity could have such a dark side. And yes, we can be kind, generous, and compassionate, but we must also admit that deep down we all have something inside us that can turn monstrous. That experience left its mark on me. Sometimes we cannot ignore that the line between good and evil becomes quite thin in extreme situations. What I saw was a harsh reality. Humans can be both saviors and exterminators, and I don't want to think about how far we would go when rage and revenge take hold of us. Some time ago, I decided to leave my country, my family, my life behind and move to Los Angeles to pursue my dream of becoming an actress. I had loved acting since I was a child, and although I knew it wouldn't be an easy road, I decided to take the risk. As soon as I arrived in Los Angeles, I met a man who offered me a cheap 3-day lease in a small basement. It was my chance, I couldn't pass it up, so I accepted. And the next morning, full of courage and joy, I started looking for my dream job. But nowhere would they take me. As the days went by, I made some friends who became my lifeline, letting me sleep on their sofas and giving me a space to shower and change eventually. After about 2 weeks, I managed to get my first job, but it didn't last long. It was an incredibly stressful time. Every day was a constant struggle, and after 5 months of so much effort, I finally managed to get a job as a waitress in a restaurant. It was there, between plates and drinks, that I met Alba, an editor of a fashion magazine. She offered me my first real opportunity as a model, and it was obvious that I wouldn't let my moment pass me by, this golden opportunity that life was giving me. After a few photo shoots as a model, I managed to earn some money and was able to rent a better place, and then Alba advised me to post my photos on Instagram. That will give you exposure. Brands will notice you, she told me. So I decided to take the risk and started uploading photos, and within a few months, suddenly, boom, I was an Instagram success. I don't want to sound self-centered, but the truth is that I'm quite attractive, and with a little makeup, I look amazing. Within 3 months, I had over 1,000 followers and some job offers started coming in. Despite my success as a model, my real focus was acting. I always told Alba that I wanted to make the transition to acting, but she insisted that I should take advantage of the opportunities I had and not risk losing them. After 6 months, I already had 10,000 followers on Instagram and several modeling jobs on my resume. It was then that I received a direct message from an anonymous account that said, "Would you like to be an actress?" My heart leapt with joy. This was exactly what I had been waiting for, so without thinking twice, I replied yes. Within minutes, they asked if I was free the following weekend, and when I confirmed, they sent me an invitation to audition for a leading role in a film. I was overcome with emotion. I jumped all over my apartment, unable to contain my joy. Finally, it seemed that this could be the opportunity I had been waiting for, and that my dreams were coming true. That day, I got up early, as I couldn't sleep from the excitement. I had a shower and chose my best dress. I also asked a friend to do my makeup because I knew it was going to be a big audition, and I couldn't let it slip away. When I arrived at a high-rise building in the city center, My heart was beating so fast I was full of emotions, and I was just one step away from fulfilling my dreams. When I entered, a girl attended to me, and she made me wait a few minutes, so I waited patiently in the lobby until they called me in. However, when I went into the conference room, something didn't feel right. I felt confused because this didn't seem like an audition as such, but there were only 5 men dressed almost identically in scary dark suits, and their faces were like blank masks. Only one of them greeted me with a slight nod, making me feel overwhelmed. I immediately became nervous, but I tried to keep calm, and I repeated to myself that it was just an audition, just one more. In an instant, a man appeared in front of me. He must have been in his 50s. He came closer and closer to me, and there was something in his gaze that made me uneasy, but I carried on, trying to keep the hope that this was going to be the beginning of something big. However, deep down, a small voice was telling me that maybe this wasn't what it seemed. The guy at the front started to speak. "Hi, I'm Martinez, and you must be Demiri." "Yes," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. Although the atmosphere made me nervous, I tried to stay calm and not let it get to me. "So Demiri, do you have any acting experience?" he continued to ask. I told him yes, that I had done theater in my city, but that I had no experience in front of a camera. I wanted to be honest. "So if you don't have any experience, why do you want to be an actress?" Martinez continued, staring at me, and I couldn't help feeling like I was on some kind of test, so I blurted out that I had always dreamed of being a famous actress, that I'd grown up admiring Meryl Streep and Jennifer Aniston, and that I wanted to achieve the same level of success as them. "What would you be willing to sacrifice to achieve it?" he asked me, and that was a question that made me stop in my tracks. Hi everyone, my name is Elian, and this happened to me and my wife a couple of years ago. It turns out that my wife, who was about to turn 31, felt like going to a concert of her favorite country artists. The idea seemed simpler than it really was, as the ticket prices were crazy. The worst seats were over $200, and to be honest, I don't have much experience with concerts, so I thought they could be cheaper. Luckily, her favorite artist's tour was coming to our city, so it was the perfect opportunity to plan a super gift for her. The tickets went on sale on a Tuesday, and as I was working, I thought I could schedule them later. But of course, I didn't count on the interest being so high, and in the end, when I got home after work, there was nothing left. I couldn't believe it. Frustration overwhelmed me when I saw that the show was already sold out. What do I do now? I asked myself, as I threw my hands up in frustration. A friend of mine advised me to check the secondary ticket market, but I already knew that I was going to have to pay an even higher price there. However, with a glimmer of hope, I started to search on websites like StubHub and Vivid Seats, but I had no luck, so I decided to look on Facebook Marketplace, thinking that I might find something from a local seller who wasn't such a rip-off artist. I sent a bunch of messages but didn't get many replies, and the ones that did reply kept raising the prices every time we exchanged messages. After days of frustration, I was about to give up, and that's when I found a guy called Marcos, who was selling 2 tickets at a price that seemed reasonable. I was thrilled and wrote to him straight away, hoping he still had the tickets. But after about 30 minutes of not hearing anything, I assumed that someone else had already contacted him. A little disappointed, I decided to go to sleep that night. But the next morning, as I was getting ready for work, I received a message on my cell phone. Marcos had replied, and yes, he still had the tickets. I couldn't believe it. I asked him when I could pick them up, and he told me he had some interested parties, but he needed payment through PayPal to secure the purchase. I accepted without hesitation. That way I knew my money was protected, so I quickly sent him the money, and he confirmed that he had received it. The man told me he could send me the tickets by mail, but if I preferred, we could meet to give them to me in person. As it was a gift, I preferred to collect them in person, so we agreed to meet at a supermarket at 8 p.m. When the day arrived, I decided to arrive a little earlier so as not to keep him waiting. I parked at the back of the place, nervous about the wait, and after a while an old car pulled up near my car, but I didn't know if it was him or not. About 5 minutes passed, and I saw a guy get out of the car and come over. "Are you Marcos?" I asked. "Yes, that's right. Thanks for buying the tickets." He gave me the tickets and we started chatting for a while. I told him they were a gift from my wife, and we both said our goodbyes amicably. The following week, the big day of the concert arrived. She was very excited when I gave her the tickets, and when we arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was incredible. The view from our seats was great, and we enjoyed some drinks right away. But just as one of the opening acts was about to start, I felt someone touch my shoulder, and when I turned around, guess who was there? It was Marcos. "Hi, how's it going? Sorry I'm late, the traffic was brutal," he said. I was very surprised to see him there and right behind me, but I didn't think anything was wrong, just that it was an interesting coincidence, so I introduced him to my wife and he was very polite. However, once she went to sit down, the conversation became strange. Suddenly Marcos started talking as if we had all planned to go together. It was a bit confusing because his attitude made it seem like we were friends. Every time he said something, I tried to play along, keeping up a conversation, but at the same time, I was enjoying the show. As the concert progressed, Marcos kept interrupting and talking every so often. I wasn't sure if he had realized that I really only knew him because of the ticket sale. My wife, who was sitting in the aisle seat, looked at me a little confused. It was obvious that something didn't add up with the way he was behaving, and he often said things like, "It's so good that we're here together," or "I'm glad you could finally bring your wife." The truth is that I was somewhere between uncomfortable and enjoying myself. The atmosphere at the concert was great, but I was worried that Marcos thought I was part of a plan that we hadn't made. In the end, the concert ended and everyone started to get up, but we stayed a little longer. However, there was something strange about Marcos, and although my wife seemed to be enjoying herself, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The way Marcos looked at me and then smiled without really smiling. It was weird. So at the end of the show, I decided it was best to put a stop to the situation. I told my wife that I appreciated her selling us the tickets, but that it was time to go home. She looked at me confused, but I didn't feel like spending the rest of the night talking to this guy. So I got up, put on my jacket, and as we started walking towards the aisle, I felt a hand grab my arm. It was Marcos again. Before I could say anything, I blurted out, "Hey, this is a night to enjoy with my wife, we're going home." My tone was harsher than it should have been, and I instantly felt bad for having spoken to him like that. That night, my wife and I decided to stop and buy some food, and then sat on the sofa, enjoying a nice dinner before going to sleep. Over the following weeks, our life returned to normal. We were busy with work and doing what we all like to do at home. But one day, while trying to do a little reading and fall asleep, I received a Facebook alert. There was a message from Marcos that said something like, "I'm glad you had fun at the concert. I'm sorry if I was too pushy, but I'd really like to get to know you better." That made my blood run cold. Without thinking, I deleted the message and blocked his profile instantly. The truth is that I'm not a social media person, and this guy was meddling in my life without invitation. The message made me uneasy, and although I tried not to think about it, the subject kept hanging around in my head. About 6 or 7 weeks passed, and one afternoon my wife and I were on the sofa playing on our phones when suddenly our dog started barking like crazy. I immediately became alert when I heard a loud knock on the door. It was unusual for someone to come and visit us, so I told my wife to stay calm and decided to go to the garage to see what was going on. But when I opened the door, my heart sank. There was Marcos, standing there with a big smile on his face. I almost fainted when I saw him. I muttered something like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And he, without losing his composure, apologized. He said something about having tickets to a concert the following week and thought my wife and I might want to go. His smile and the situation itself was so awkward that I was speechless. But what came next was even more disturbing. I asked him how he had got my address, and he calmly replied that he had got it from the PayPal transaction. At that moment, anger took hold of me, and this time I warned him that if he ever showed up at my house again, I would call the police. Although the guy seemed harmless, I didn't like him at all. I told him I'd set my dogs on him if he didn't leave. When I went back inside, my wife asked me who he was. Without thinking, I told her he was just a UPS delivery guy, but the tension in the air was palpable. Days went by and I felt that something wasn't right. I noticed that the lights in the garden were turning on more than usual, as if something was activating them. In addition, from time to time I heard strange noises outside, as if the windows were being torn or creaked. I tried not to give it too much importance, thinking that it was my hypersensitive mind playing tricks, but although there were no more incidents with Marcos, it is clear that I will never buy anything on Facebook again. The experience left a bitter taste in my mouth and a constant worry about what can happen when you let strangers into your life. I don't know if I would dare to risk it again or even attend another concert. Alexis Sharkey was born in Houston, Texas back in 1994, the daughter of Mike Robinault and Stacy. After finishing secondary school, she went into education and enrolled at a university in Pittsburgh, where she studied biology. However, after graduating, she was in no hurry to find a job in teaching. Instead, she joined a company called Monat, which specializes in skincare products. While working at Monat, something unexpected happened. She began to gain a legion of followers on Instagram. Her natural beauty and glamorous lifestyle captured the attention of many people. She and her husband, Tom, were now consultants at the company and earned a lot of money from it, so they enjoyed frequent trips and vacations. And of course, Alexis didn't miss the opportunity to share her life with her followers, uploading photos of their getaways and showing off their luxurious life in Houston. Her popularity grew so much that, by December 2020, she already had more than 70,000 followers. As is often the case with influencers, brands began to approach her, offering her large sums of money to promote their products. She seized the opportunity, and although she was still working full-time at Monat, suddenly her income skyrocketed even more thanks to the sponsorships. But not everything was rosy in Alexis's life. It turns out that a close friend of hers revealed that she was filing for divorce from Tom. People had always suspected that their relationship was not very solid, as he was much older than her, and despite their intense attraction, they seemed to have little in common. Over Thanksgiving weekend, Alexis saw an opportunity to get away from the tension with Tom. She stayed at a friend's house for the celebrations and told him she would return after the weekend. But on Saturday, her mother, Stacy, received a call from Tom. "I haven't been able to reach Alexis since Friday," he said with concern. Stacy's distress increased, and a few days later, on November 28th, she decided to post on Facebook that her daughter had been missing for more than 24 hours and that the police were already involved, noting that the last time anyone saw her was in Houston. Stacy was particularly alarmed because she had not seen her daughter since last Christmas due to travel restrictions caused by the pandemic. Alexis had planned to spend Thanksgiving with her parents in Pennsylvania, but they decided it was better for her to stay in Texas because of the situation. That same morning that Stacy posted on Facebook, a sanitation worker in Houston noticed something strange by the side of the road. At first, he thought it was a mannequin because of the slim figure and how well dressed it was. But as he got closer, he realized that something was not right and immediately contacted his supervisor. Terrified, the worker explained that there could be a bigger problem, so his boss, John, went to check it out. When he arrived, he corroborated what the worker feared. It was not a mannequin, but a lifeless human body. The shock was devastating, and although he was in shock, he knew he had to call the police. John later shared that this image would haunt him forever. 2 days later, on November 30th, the Houston police held a press conference to announce that they had identified the body, which, as you can imagine, was that of Alexis Sharkey. Tom received a call from the coroner's office asking him to come and identify the body. He already feared the worst, and although he knew it was going to be Alexis, he plucked up the courage to go to the morgue. But even so, when he saw her on the table, his heart sank. Surprisingly, there were no obvious signs of injury, but the tragedy of losing her was overwhelming. As news of Alexis's death began to circulate, rumors began to emerge. Some spoke of Tom's abuse as the cause of her death, and anonymous accounts appeared on social media claiming to be from Alexis's friends, posting about the tension in their relationship. It was discovered that the separation was generating a considerable level of stress in their home, and this led to increasing negative attention towards the couple's marriage. As a result, the community exploded with speculation and theories about what had really happened. Social media was flooded with comments, and many people began to question the nature of Alexis's relationship with Tom. Meanwhile, Alexis's family was trying to come to terms with the devastating loss. For them, it was a time of mourning, but also of confusion and anger, as no one wanted to think that the man with whom their daughter had shared so much could be responsible for her tragic end. In the weeks that followed, things only got more complicated. As the investigations progressed, the truth about her life and death began to come to light, leaving everyone with more questions than answers. These same anonymous friends began to share disturbing information about Alexis. They claimed that she herself had told them that her fights with Tom had escalated to violence on several occasions, and that there had been times when Tom had lost control and become physically violent towards her. This was not good for Tom's reputation, and he quickly became the target of the press. While some saw him as a good-for-nothing, others began to make more serious accusations, and thousands of angry people pointed the finger at him, giving him the title of the murderer with almost no evidence. At first, Tom decided to remain silent about his wife's death. However, when the death threats started to pile up, he realized he had to speak up, so he contacted a local news channel, where he made a statement that left many speechless. He said that there were no problems in their marriage and that, in fact, he denied that they were going to separate. He also insinuated that Alexis was drunk the night she left her friend's house after the Thanksgiving celebrations, which generated even more suspicion. Alexis's mother, Stacy, was in a desperate situation. She firmly believed that something horrible had happened to her daughter. The autopsy revealed that foul play could not be ruled out, which only increased Stacy's concern. "I have no doubt that my daughter was murdered. The state her body was found in says it all," she said, filled with anguish. Alexis's friends had told Stacy that on a recent trip to Mexico, she had expressed concern for her life. This left even more questions about the true nature of her relationship with Tom. The police tried to rule out Tom as the main suspect, as he was apparently willing to cooperate in the investigation. However, things did not look the same for the public. Social networks were on fire, and many people believed that the case was taking a turn that could lead to an imminent arrest. But the situation became more complicated when rumors began to emerge that Alexis's murder could be linked to her job at Monet. Monet, the beauty products company where Alexis worked, had been the subject of criticism before. It was accused of using aggressive and unethical marketing tactics. In fact, the quality of its products had been questioned long before Alexis's death, and at the time, the Florida Attorney General was investigating the company due to accusations that its products caused skin and hair problems. There were even lawsuits from customers who claimed to have suffered damage after using her products. Alexis was an exceptional salesperson and had won a $10,000 check in a sales contest. This put her in the spotlight, as many affected women could blame her for their dermatological complications. In addition, there were rumors that Monet had left many people in financial trouble, especially those who bought large quantities of products. This led to questions about whether anyone, upon learning what was happening, might have felt Alexis was responsible for their situation and decided to retaliate. Some people believed that the anger of a scorned woman could have led someone to seek revenge. In that sense, Alexis's relationship with Monet could have had fatal consequences. While the police continued to investigate, the public debate revolved around Alexis's relationship with her husband and her work on Monet. It was ironic to think that the same networks that brought her fame and opportunities also led to her demise. More than one wondered if such things can be taken out of people's control. Stacy, the devastated mother, just wanted the truth to come out and justice for her daughter. The case became more complicated as more questions than answers emerged. People couldn't stop looking for someone to blame, and the mysterious accident that ended Alexis's life remained in the air. For months, speculation about the case kept coming up. However, nothing conclusive came to light. All that was known was that Alexis had died of mechanical asphyxia, but there were no signs of violence on his body, no marks on his neck, nothing to suggest that he had been asphyxiated. But just when the authorities had reached a dead end, in an unexpected turn of events, the truth came to light. The police department received an anonymous call from someone claiming to know Alexis's killer, and they gave them a name: Alicia. The appearance of this name in the algorithm of Alexis's mysterious death came as a complete surprise, especially since Alicia was another well-known fashion influencer. But what came next left everyone speechless. When this woman was arrested by the authorities, it didn't take her long to confess. It turns out that she and Alexis were lovers. They had been in a secret relationship for months, and Alexis had talked to her about leaving her husband to be with her. However, a few weeks ago, Alexis had decided to give her marriage another chance and ended the relationship, but Alicia was not willing to accept it. That night, Alicia called Alexis to meet her at her apartment to give her some of her things, and while they were there, she convinced her to stay a few more hours. Alexis agreed, and after having an intimate encounter, she fell asleep. And that's when Alicia took advantage of the situation and suffocated her with the pillows. After this, she put her in her car and abandoned her body in the place where she was later found. This story shocked everyone, as apparently no one, not even her closest friends, had any idea that these women knew each other, much less that there was a relationship between them. Alicia was eventually convicted, and Alexis's family and husband were able to find some closure. A few weeks ago, I decided to take a trip, so I packed my things, put them in my suitcase, and went to the bus stop. I waited for the right bus to begin my 48-hour trip to Denver, where my family on my father's side were waiting for me. And as it was a long journey, I relaxed watching out of the window, then listened to music on my headphones, and dealt with the snoring of an old lady with red hair who had settled down next to me. Everything was going well until, just as we crossed over to the Colorado side, my headphones ran out of battery. I couldn't listen to music anymore, but my cell phone still had power, so I decided to connect to the bus's Wi-Fi network and check out social media, especially Instagram. With my cell phone, I posted some photos of the landscape I was seeing and was surprised to notice that many people commented. Suddenly, I received a notification of a new follower, Gustavo Fuentes. I couldn't recognize his photo and his account was private, so I took the best option of not following him back. The bus stopped for a bathroom break in a mountain village, and while we all got off, I took the opportunity to walk and take some photos of the mountains. The view was breathtaking, and it was also a good opportunity to stretch my legs a little, as I still had a few hours to go before reaching my destination. When I got back on the bus, I noticed that the lady with red hair was no longer next to me. In her place was a young, slim, dark-skinned, dark-haired guy. I was a little surprised, but it took me a moment to realize that it was Gustavo, the one who had started following me on Instagram. I assumed that he had been sitting right behind me watching what I did throughout the trip, so I didn't think much of it and smiled at him. He introduced himself, explaining that the woman with red hair had got off at the last stop and that he took the opportunity to keep me company. At that moment, a chill ran down my spine. I didn't know if it was a good or bad omen that he appeared just then. I was scared, but saying no to him was even more uncomfortable. So I decided to relax, as I didn't think anything serious could happen to me. At that moment, the bus returned to the highway, and we started talking about how beautiful the view was. And he seemed like a friendly guy, but his behavior was too intense. He acted like we were best friends, just because he had started following me on Instagram. I tried putting my headphones back on, even though they didn't work, just because it was a good excuse not to talk much. But Gustavo wasn't giving up. Every time I fell silent for a few seconds, he filled the silence with questions, some of them too personal for my liking. Why was I traveling alone? What did I do in my free time? It gave me this weird feeling like he was trying to get to know me too quickly. Then he brought up the subject of Instagram and asked me why I hadn't followed him back. He insisted, "Do it now, I want you to see all my photos." I started to feel more uncomfortable, so I finally decided to take out my phone and opened Instagram. Went into my notifications, searched for his account, and when I managed to find his account, I saw that he was watching me in a creepy way. I pressed the follow button, even though I didn't really want to, and that bothered me. Someone telling me what to do. Gustavo seemed satisfied, while I was just thinking about unfollowing him as soon as we got to Denver. He smiled and changed the subject, asking me strange questions like if I was extreme in my photos, to which I replied that I had no idea what that meant. "Don't worry," he said, implying that he would explain it to me later. However, even as he was talking, I felt that I didn't want to know. I just wanted to get to my destination and not find out any more about this guy who made my hair stand on end. The worrying atmosphere began to intensify. Then, to my surprise, I looked at my phone and saw that he had accepted me into his account. I was immediately overcome with a feeling of unease and fear, as his description said special effects makeup artist, and all his photos showed what appeared to be murder scenes with bloody victims. In one of the photos, you could see blood dripping from the dismembered arms and legs, and I felt dizzy. The idea that this guy, whom I had just met, was a fanatic of that kind of horror left me frozen. But I was also surprised by how incredible his talent as a makeup artist was. I felt scared and didn't know what to think. My instinct told me that I had to get out of there as soon as possible. What was I doing by his side? As I came back to reality, he was still smiling, with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I decided to stay calm and take a deep breath. In an instant, I started to imagine the best way to distance myself from him once we got to Denver. Suddenly, Gustavo smiled and said to me, "You should see my latest photo. I think you're going to love it." I didn't want to see his chilling photos anymore, but he insisted so much that I nodded just to get him to stop bothering me. When I saw it on my phone, I couldn't help but gasp. It was a picture of an older woman with red hair with a knife stuck in her. It was the same woman who had been sitting next to me during the trip. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that that guy had been so cruel. I couldn't get that horrifying image out of my head, and the worst thing was that the photo had been taken next to the toilets at our last stop. Suddenly, I realized that Gustavo wasn't just a makeup artist. Those photos were real, with real bodies and real blood. Christ on a bike. I was sitting next to a serial killer. How could that guy, who was so friendly, have committed the murders of all those people, including that poor old lady? Why was he doing this? But above all, why did he want to sit next to me? I noticed how his smile widened when he saw my horrified expression. "You're not going to say anything, are you?" he asked me. But I was just shocked, feeling a chill run through my body. Instead, he just laughed, as if all this was just a game. At that moment, I thought that the bus was full of people and it was night, and we still had an hour before arriving in Denver. I was paralyzed in my seat, too scared to move, while Gustavo kept looking at me, as if he were waiting for me to say something interesting. In a careless moment, the boy took a bloody knife out of his pocket. It was the same one he had used on the red-haired old woman, and my heart stopped. I thought it would be the end of me. Suddenly, Gustavo pushed me back and I could feel the edge of the knife pressing against my side. Then, leaning towards me, he whispered, "Don't make a scene." "I have many followers who admire my work," he replied. Then, with a voice on the edge, I replied, "I'm a little jealous of you for having so many followers. Maybe if I took a photo with you, I would get lots of followers too." I didn't even know why I said that to him. I assumed he was a crazy narcissist, and in that case, it's best to play to his ego. He was happy to be asked to take a photo with me. I was terrified. I told him we could take a selfie on my phone and I would tag him in it. He was surprised by my offer, but finally put the knife back in his pocket and accepted. So I picked up my phone and quickly took a selfie with him. While he was looking at the photo on his phone, I took advantage of the distraction and jumped out of my seat, running to the front of the bus. I shouted at the driver to stop, and he, confused, slammed on the brakes and looked at me angrily. It was then that I pointed at Gustavo and told him that he had assaulted me. The driver, without asking any questions, took a gun out of his pocket and pointed it at Gustavo, then opened the bus door and ordered him to get out. From his reaction, he seemed to have had similar experiences before. So even though we were in the middle of nowhere, Gustavo just walked down the aisle smiling from ear to ear and turned around one last time saying, "I'll see you soon," before the doors closed behind him. I returned to my seat, trembling and trying to calm down, but my heart was racing. I felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. We soon arrived in Denver, and without wasting any time, I went straight from the bus station to the police station, as they were close by. I told the police everything that had happened during the trip, but when I tried to show them his Instagram profile, Gustavo had already blocked me. The officers assured me that they would investigate the case, but weeks have passed and I still have no idea what happened to him. Every time I look at my phone, I feel a knot in my stomach. What will happen if he shows up again? The feeling of insecurity haunts me, and I just hope that, for everyone's sake, they catch him before he attacks other people. It was just another day in Moscow when I met Irina Vrakova, a 26-year-old who seemed to have it all. She was an incredible dermatologist, a graduate of Moscow State Medical University, and not only was she brilliant at her job, but she had also made a name for herself as an influencer on social media, where she shared her fun life with her hundreds of thousands of followers. In fact, she had come second in a local beauty contest, which only increased her popularity. Irina was the queen of travel, as she loved to travel, and would often post photos on Instagram of her trips to incredible places like Italy and Spain. She always had a glass of wine in her hand, enjoying a fabulous life. However, despite her facade of perfection, there were shadows in her life. During the summer of 2021, she opened up to one of her closest friends, Nina, and told her that she had made an enemy who was stalking her in a very disturbing way. A few days later, Irina's family decided it was time to act, so they spoke to the police. Several days had passed without hearing from her, and that was completely unusual, as Irina was always active on her networks, but on this occasion her silence was worrying. Days later, Irina's mother found out that her daughter had been dating someone new, and that she was planning a trip to the Netherlands to celebrate her birthday. There, her concern became more intense. Nina tried to calm the family down, suggesting that maybe she was just busy enjoying a vacation alone. But as the hours went by, her concern grew and the family couldn't sit idly by. So they contacted her landlord who, with some reluctance, allowed them to enter Irina's apartment. When they opened the door, the room looked tidy. Everything seemed normal at first. Her clothes were neatly folded and things were in their place. But in the hallway, something strange caught the family's attention. There was a huge, heavy suitcase that didn't seem to fit in with the rest of her belongings, and this was quite a curious find, as she liked to have her things in order. Some of her cousins, who were with her parents, decided to open the suitcase to see what was inside. However, it was an electronic suitcase and had a security code. At that point, everyone was feeling frustrated. They had no information about the young woman, and so they called in an expert to find out what was in the suitcase. Within minutes, the expert managed to open it, but no one was prepared for what they found inside. There was Irina's bloodied and decomposing body. The scene was so horrifying and sinister that it left everyone in shock. There was a deep cut on her neck and multiple wounds on her chest and abdomen, and what was even more chilling, she was totally dismembered. The police arrived quickly to investigate the crime scene, but they found no murder weapon and no signs of a robbery or struggle. It all seemed like an unsolvable puzzle. While trying to understand what had happened, they decided to check the girl's social media. In doing so, they discovered that she had been receiving surprises from a secret admirer with huge bouquets of flowers, boxes of chocolates, and romantic notes full of compliments. However, the situation took a turn for the worse when they found out that Irina had broken up with her boyfriend, Vlad Petrov, just a few weeks before, and everything indicated that he might not have taken it so lightly. So the police continued to investigate the case, trying to find more evidence and thus find the culprit of this horrible crime. The recordings from the building's security cameras confirmed their suspicions. They showed Vlad near Irina's apartment in the days leading up to her disappearance. It was clear that their relationship had not ended on good terms. The girl's friends said that she had expressed concern about her ex-partner, fearing that he might not be able to cope with the breakup. From that moment on, Vlad became the main suspect in the crime. The police launched an intensive search for the young woman's ex-boyfriend, but they were unable to locate him. After a few days, they finally managed to capture him in a safe house. In the interrogation room, Vlad became emotional, venting about the breakup, which he described as brutal, and that Irina, according to him, constantly ridiculed and humiliated him on her social media, saying that although he had given her generous gifts, she ridiculed him, saying that he was ugly and that not even a good plastic surgeon could fix him. This made him obsessed with his appearance, and he underwent several surgeries that left him practically unrecognizable. But even so, she did not stop belittling him. He also said that she had let him know that it would take her a year to save up enough money to be together again, which left him desperate, as he had spent everything on surgeries. While the police were still dealing with his version of events, they began to consider the possibility that Irina had made dangerous decisions, such as trying to finance her luxurious lifestyle at the expense of dating wealthy men. However, Vlad, in a moment of blind rage, confessed that he had stabbed his late girlfriend several times in the neck and chest. He said with a trembling voice that he deeply regretted what had happened, and that he tried to lock himself in the bathroom after the attack. Vlad's account was confusing as he described being in a state of shock during the attack, as if the violence had left him completely numb. In his version of events, when she tried to confront him, he delivered one final blow, and that was what proved fatal. The man confessed that after that he felt desperate and overwhelmed, and not knowing what to do with the body, he decided to dismember it and put it in the suitcase and then get rid of it in an alley or desolate place, but he soon realized that this was not feasible. So he decided to abandon the suitcase with Irina's body and flee the scene. During the trial, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Vlad could not bear the weight of what he had done, so he covered his face with his hands when confronted by the court, and in the midst of his torment, he pleaded guilty to all charges. But just 2 weeks after being taken to prison, he took his own life by hanging himself with his own uniform. The story of love and hate between Irina and Vlad became a chilling warning about the dangers of obsession with image and fame. The tragedy of Irina and Vlad underlined that sometimes the shadows lurk closer than you think.